Today I'm testing the best AI tools for literature reviews, and I'm doing it so you don't have to. Because right now there are so many deep research tools being launched that it's starting to feel like a shiny new vending machine every week. But the real question is simple. Can you actually trust them for academic research, or are they just good at sounding confident? In this video, I'm using one clear scorecard, and I'm showing my receipts as we go. Because in research, pretty is not the same as useful, and fast is not the same as right. Here's what I'm testing for every tool. Can it pull information from the past 2 years? Can it give you a lot of solid references? Can it explain what it found in a way that is clear and actually usable? Can it provide multimedia like figures, tables, and graphs? And can you export the results so you can do something real with them after the tool is done talking? Because if you've ever stared at a messy pile of papers or spent hours reading only to realize you still can't write a clean paragraph, you already know the pain. You don't need more words, you need structure, sources, and something you can build on. And I want this to feel like a community test, not a sales pitch. So while you watch, tell me in the comments what your biggest struggle is right now, finding recent papers, organizing themes, or turning notes into writing, because I'm going to keep that in mind as we test. These are the criteria that matter for real research. These are the tools I'm putting through the same test. And by the end, we're going to see which one actually wins for literature reviews. I'm starting with ChatGPT because it's the tool most people already have open in a tab, and that matters. The principle of this test is fairness. Same prompt, same expectations, and I don't rescue the tool unless it forces me to clarify what it wants. Why does that matter for a literature review? Because when you're tired, when your deadline is close, you won't have the energy to babysit an AI that only performs well when you hold its hand. You need something that can handle a real research request and stay anchored to evidence. So I pasted the exact same prompt into ChatGPT. Provide a summary of the current state of research on the use of nanostructured electrodes in organic solar cells, including key materials, challenges, scalability, and recent breakthroughs from the past 2 years. Include references or links to peer-reviewed studies where possible. And ChatGPT did what it often does. It asked me follow-up questions, basically saying, "Tell me what you actually want." I answered, because in real life, you would answer too. After that, it went into deep mode. And in this run, it told me it used a large number of sources and spent a long time generating the response. The proof moment for ChatGPT is whether the output is truly research grade. Does it show figures and tables pulled from actual papers? Does it clearly separate key materials from scalability and recent breakthroughs? And does it make it easy to trace claims back to sources? In this run, the content itself was strong and practical, and it even included visuals like figures and tables, which is a huge plus for learning because visuals turn abstract claims into something you can actually compare. But here's the problem that made me pause. There was a disconnect between the number of references it claimed and the number it clearly showed at the bottom. That's not a small detail. That is the difference between I can trust this to start a draft and I still need to double check everything by hand. The consequence, if you ignore that gap, is painful. You end up quoting an AI-generated narrative that sounds convincing. Then you waste hours later trying to reconstruct where each claim came from. Mini recap, ChatGPT can give you rich explanations and even multimedia, but your guardrail is simple and repetitive on purpose, because repetition is what keeps you safe. If the references aren't visible and consistent, treat the output as a map, not the destination. If you want to try ChatGPT with this exact workflow, the link is in the description. And if you do, comment whether you care more about depth of explanation or perfectly traceable citations, because those are two different needs. Now, SciSpace is a different promise. The principle here is specialization. A tool built for academia should behave like a research assistant, not like a general chat partner. Why is that important? Because literature reviews are not won by one brilliant summary. They're won by selection, organization, and citation hygiene. The real pain is not I can't read. The pain is I read 20 papers and I still can't write one clean paragraph because nothing is organized. So I fed SciSpace the exact same prompt and used its deep review. What I liked right away is that it showed the research steps it took to find relevant papers, which feels closer to how a real review begins, not with a conclusion, but with retrieval. In this run, SciSpace leaned into a top papers approach, where it pulls from a limited set like the top 20 papers, unless you pay for more. That design choice has a trade-off. On one hand, it can feel less wordy, less like a long report, and more like a structured set of references you can build on. On the other hand, if you're expecting a huge narrative with every angle covered, you might feel like it's giving you paragraph reference, without the deep explanatory glue. The proof moment here is recency and exportability. I checked the years on the papers it surfaced, and it did a strong job respecting the past 2 years requirement, which is critical when your topic is moving fast. And in terms of export, SciSpace shines in a way that matters in real academic workflows. It lets you export references to formats people actually use, like BibTeX or RISE. That is not glamorous, but it is the difference between I can cite this correctly in my paper and I'm going to mess up my reference manager at 2 a.m. The consequence, if you rely on SciSpace for the wrong job, is frustration. If you need a long, highly explained narrative, you may feel underfed. But if your biggest pain is, I need the right papers fast and I need my references clean, SciSpace is a serious tool. Mini recap, SciSpace may not flood you with text, but it can give you strong, recent papers and exportable citations. If you want to try SciSpace, the link is in the description. And tell me this in the comments. Do you want more explanation or more papers? Because your answer changes which tool wins for you. Next is Perplexity, and the principle here is clickable transparency. For literature reviews, there's a kind of relief that comes from being able to click a claim and immediately see where it came from. Why? Because it reduces the mental load. Instead of trusting a black box, you can verify as you go, and that keeps you calm. So I ran the exact same prompt, and Perplexity returned a referenced overview with a large source count shown in the interface. It felt quick, it felt on topic, and it let me click out to sources, which is a strong proof moment feature because it encourages verification rather than blind trust. But here's the tension that showed up in this run. When I tried to export the output, the export didn't carry the same source list that the interface suggested. That kind of mismatch matters. In academia, what you can keep is more important than what you can see for 5 seconds on a screen. The other limitation is structure. Perplexity gave a reasonable overview, but it did not always carve out the same explicit sectioning that a good literature review needs, like a clean recent breakthroughs area that you can directly use. So the consequence if you treat it like a full literature review writer is that you may get a document that reads fine but feels thin when you try to build a thesis argument from it. Mini recap. Perplexity is useful for fast, source-linked exploration, but you must test the export, and you must check whether the sources you see are the sources you keep. If you want to try Perplexity, the link is in the description, and I want you to comment one thing. When you do a literature review, do you struggle more with finding papers or turning papers into structure? Perplexity helps the first more than the second in this kind of test. Now, Gemini surprised me in a good way, and I'm saying that carefully. The principle here is citation density, because citation density is what protects you from hallucination when you're doing research. Why does that matter so much? Because in a thesis or PhD context, one wrong sentence can infect a whole section. You quote it, you build on it, you repeat it, and suddenly you're defending something that was never true. That is not just embarrassing, it is expensive in time. So I used the exact same prompt again, and Gemini produced a deep report with an extremely large number of references in the project. In this run, it looked even better when exported to a document view because the structure and the referencing became more obvious. Sentence after sentence tied to references, and references running for pages. That is a powerful proof moment. When you can scroll and see that the tool is constantly anchoring claims, it makes it easier for you to audit. And that is the word I care about here. Audit. A good AI tool doesn't just answer, it helps you audit the answer. Gemini also passed the recency test in this run when I checked several references, and exportability was strong because it could be moved into a document workflow. The main weakness in this run was multimedia. I did not see the same kind of tables or figures being surfaced in the output itself the way some other tools did. That doesn't kill it, but it's a note. The consequence if you pick a tool with low citation density is that you feel fast today and you feel terrified later when you can't trace a claim. Mini recap. Gemini, in this test, was a heavyweight for references and traceability, especially when exported to a doc view. If you want to try Gemini, the link is in the description, and please remember the repeating rule that keeps you safe. If you can't trace it, don't paste it. Manus AI is interesting because it behaves more like a research agent than a single chat window. The principle is segmentation. Break a complex research request into parts, work each part, then combine. Why is that valuable for literature reviews? Because messy structure is one of the biggest reasons people feel like they're forgetting everything. You're not forgetting, you're drowning in unorganized pieces. When you separate key materials from scalability from recent breakthroughs, your brain can breathe. So I gave Manus the exact same prompt, and in this run it produced multiple files, each one focused on a specific piece of the request, like recent breakthroughs and scalability challenges, and then a combined final result style output. That is genuinely useful in practice because you can lift a section straight into your outline. The proof moment, though, is referencing style. In this run, the references were not always placed exactly where you want them in the text. Some references appeared more like a list at the bottom or in a separate references file rather than being clearly linked sentence by sentence in the body. That matters because if the text says Yang et al., but you can't quickly jump to the exact reference entry, you lose time, and time is the hidden cost of every AI tool. Still, Manus was exportable in this run, and the segmented files were a strong practical advantage for building a literature review structure. The consequence, if you rely on segmented outputs without tight in-text referencing, is that you might accidentally adopt a claim without knowing exactly which paper supported it, and then you have to reconstruct your citation trail later. Mini recap. Manus can help you organize and segment your review like a real research workflow, but you must watch how references connect to claims. If you want to try Manus AI, the link is in the description, and tell me this. Do you prefer one long report, or do you prefer separate section files you can stitch into an outline? Finally, Storm. The principle here is access. A tool that is free or easier to access can still be valuable if it helps you get a quick view of a field. Why does that matter? Because not everyone has budget for every tool, and sometimes you just need a starting map before you pick which mountain to climb. In this run, Storm produced a referenced overview, but the proof moment problem was visibility and usability of those references. The references were not presented in a way that made it easy to confirm recency. I couldn't quickly see, at a glance, whether the citations were truly from the past 2 years without clicking or hovering through each one. And that creates friction. In academic work, friction is the enemy of consistency. If verification is annoying, you do less verification, and then you drift into trusting output you haven't checked. Storm also didn't shine on exportability or multimedia in this run, which limits how directly you can plug it into a real literature review workflow. The consequence is that if you treat Storm like a full literature review engine, you may waste time because you have to do too much manual checking and formatting. But as a free starting point to explore a topic, it can still be useful. Mini recap. Storm can be a decent first pass, but it's not the tool I would lean on when citations and recency are non-negotiable. If you want to try Storm anyway, the link is in the description, and I want you to use it with one clear mindset. It's a starting map, not your final destination. Before we move on, I want to zoom out for a second, because this is the part that actually helps you stop forgetting. The best tools in this test were not the ones that sounded the smartest. They were the ones that made verification easy, over and over, the ones that made your work auditable, over and over, easy to check, easy to export, easy to trace. Because research is not about sounding right, it's about being right and proving it. So if you want to test these tools yourself, every tool I mentioned has a link in the description, and I'm saying that as a practical shortcut, not a hard sell. Pick one, run the same prompt, score it with the same criteria, and then come back and tell the community what happened in your field, because your field might behave differently than this solar cell prompt. And if you're still watching right now, comment the tool you want me to test next and the exact topic you're working on, because the fastest way to make this channel truly useful is to turn your real struggles into the next case study. If we zoom out and look at the leaderboard, here's the honest takeaway. Gemini and Manus came out strong for deep research, but they win for different reasons. If what you need is a highly referenced report that you can export and actually build on, Gemini is the safest pick in this test. If what you need is your research broken into clean, separate files so you can plug each section straight into your outline, Manus is the most practical. And SciSpace is still the one I'd reach for when I mainly want exportable references to drop into a reference manager fast. But remember this, and I'm going to repeat it because it matters. The best tool is the one you can verify. The best tool is the one you can export. The best tool is the one you can trace back to real papers. Now, I want to hear from you. What tools have you tried, and what's your biggest struggle right now? Finding recent papers, organizing themes, or turning notes into writing? Drop it in the comments so we can turn it into the next case study. And if you want to go deeper, watch the next video on my channel where I show exactly how to use deep research step by step for real academic work. You'll find it right here.